There's a story that Carl Jung often told his patients, a tale of two wolves battling inside each of us. One wolf embodies our light, compassion, truth, hope. The other represents our darkness, anger, jealousy, fear. When asked which wolf wins, the answer is profound in its simplicity. The one you feed. You felt this duality within yourself, that strange sensation when something emerges from deep within, something you barely recognize. A sudden burst of rage that seems to possess you completely. An inexplicable attraction that defies your conscious values. A fear so primal, it leaves you questioning who you really are. These moments aren't aberrations in your psychological landscape. They're glimpses of what Jung called the shadow, the veiled territory of your psyche where disowned aspects of self reside in twilight consciousness. What if the very parts of yourself that you've rejected are actually the keys to your most profound healing? What if the shadow isn't something to be feared or eliminated, but integrated and transformed? What if within the darkness lies your greatest light? How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? Jung once asked. I must have a dark side also if I'm to be whole. These words aren't just poetic musings. They're an invitation to radical self-understanding and profound transformation. Your shadow forms in the tender territory of childhood, in those moments when you learn what's acceptable and what isn't. When your caregivers, teachers, or culture communicate that certain emotions or desires are inappropriate, you don't eliminate these qualities. You exile them to the basement of consciousness, to what Jung called the personal unconscious. Perhaps you were told that anger wasn't acceptable. Good children don't get angry, they said. So you learned to suppress that emotion, to disown it. Or maybe you were taught that vulnerability was weakness, so you buried your tender feelings deep inside. Whatever didn't fit the ideal image became shadow material, not destroyed but relegated to darkness. But here's what Jung understood with such profound insight. What you resist persists. What you deny doesn't disappear. It goes underground and gains autonomy beyond your conscious control. The shadow becomes like a roommate you refuse to acknowledge, but who keeps rearranging your furniture when you're not looking. Friedrich Nietzsche, whose work deeply influenced Jung, captured this paradox when he wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." Owning yourself means owning all of yourself, including the shadow. The shadow reveals itself in countless ways. Have you ever taken an immediate dislike to someone for no apparent reason? That's often shadow projection, seeing in others the very qualities you've disowned in yourself. Or perhaps you've experienced saying something completely out of character, only to wonder later, where did that come from? That's the shadow breaking through your carefully constructed persona. Jean-Paul Sartre's concept of bad faith, the self-deception through which people hide from themselves the responsibility of their freedom, connects deeply with shadow work. When you deny aspects of yourself, you're living in bad faith, refusing to acknowledge your wholeness, your complexity, your contradictions. Living in denial of your shadow extracts a terrible price. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater, requiring constant energy until, inevitably, it bursts to the surface with even greater force. The cost manifests as chronic anxiety, inexplicable depression, psychosomatic illnesses, and a persistent sense of inauthenticity. You might achieve external success while feeling hollow inside. You might maintain perfect control while your dreams fill with chaos. The shadow always finds expression, whether you acknowledge it or not. Arthur Schopenhauer, who influenced both Nietzsche and Jung, understood this dynamic when he observed that we can't directly will what we desire or feel. Man can do what he wills, he wrote, but he cannot will what he wills. Your conscious intentions are always influenced by unconscious factors, and chief among these is the shadow. The collective consequences of shadow denial are equally devastating. Jung witnessed how the denied shadow of an entire culture could erupt in the mass psychosis of totalitarianism. He understood that atrocities weren't committed by monsters, but by ordinary people who projected their disowned shadows onto convenient scapegoats. We need more understanding of human nature. Jung wrote after World War II, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. His psyche should be studied because we are the origin of all coming evil. What if you could shift your relationship with your shadow from adversary to ally? What if you recognized it as your greatest teacher? Every aspect of your shadow contains vital energy and wisdom that, when reclaimed, becomes a source of strength. Your anger, properly channeled, becomes healthy assertiveness. Your so-called selfishness, when balanced, ensures you don't deplete yourself. Your wildness, when expressed consciously, infuses your life with passion. Viktor Frankl, who endured unimaginable suffering in Nazi concentration camps, emerged with profound psychological insights. His logotherapy approach reminds us that we always retain the freedom to choose our attitude toward any circumstance. Between stimulus and response there is a space, Frankl taught. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Shadow work lives in this space, the pause between trigger and reaction where transformation becomes possible. Jung himself experienced profound confrontations with his shadow during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, following his break with Freud. Rather than being destroyed by these encounters, Jung emerged with revolutionary psychological insights. He didn't just analyze his shadow intellectually, he entered into relationship with it. Your shadow isn't a problem to be solved, but a relationship to be cultivated. The journey of shadow integration requires courage, compassion, and commitment, but the rewards are immeasurable. Increased energy, authentic relationships, enhanced creativity, and a profound sense of wholeness. How do you begin? First, acknowledge that you have a shadow. You recognize that you are not just your conscious identity, but a complex mosaic of light and darkness, known and unknown aspects. This acknowledgement alone can be revolutionary. Second, cultivate self-awareness. Notice your triggers, those moments when your emotional reaction seems disproportionate to the situation. These triggers are gold mines for shadow work because they point directly to disowned aspects of yourself. If you find yourself becoming intensely angry when someone interrupts you, perhaps you've disowned your own tendency to dominate conversations. If you're harshly judgmental of others' ambition, perhaps you've repressed your own competitive nature. Dream work offers another powerful avenue for shadow exploration. Your dreams speak in the language of symbols, bypassing conscious defenses to reveal shadow content. Jung emphasized, the dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul. By attending to your dreams with curiosity rather than fear, you invite the shadow into conscious relationship. Creative expression provides yet another path to integration. Through art, writing, movement, or music, you can give form to shadow energies in a contained, constructive way. Jung himself created elaborate mandalas as part of his inner work, finding that these creative acts facilitated psychological integration. Perhaps most importantly, shadow work requires compassionate self-acceptance. The shadow formed as a survival mechanism, a way of adapting to environments where certain aspects of your authentic self weren't welcome. Rather than judging these disowned parts, approach them with understanding. This doesn't mean indulging destructive tendencies, but recognizing that integration, not elimination, is the goal. As you continue this journey of shadow integration, something remarkable happens. The energy once locked in repression becomes available for creative expression. The psychic tension that manifested as anxiety transforms into vitality and presence. Your relationships deepen as you become more authentic and less driven by unconscious projections. You're able to see others more clearly because you're no longer using them as screens for your disowned material. You can love more fully because you've embraced your own complexity. Nietzsche's concept of amor fati, the love of fate, including all its suffering, becomes increasingly accessible as you integrate your shadow. You can embrace life in its totality, no longer needing to curate a sanitized version of existence. There's immense freedom in this acceptance. There's no coming to consciousness without pain, Jung acknowledged. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This making conscious of the darkness doesn't mean becoming dark. Paradoxically, it often leads to greater lightness of being. When you're no longer expending enormous energy on repression, you have more vitality available for joy, creativity, and presence. Shadow integration isn't just theoretical, it's practical. When triggered, pause and ask, what might this reflect in me? Notice patterns in your attractions and conflicts. Do you consistently choose partners who embody qualities you've disowned? Do particular behaviors in others reliably trigger disproportionate reactions in you? Even your body carries shadow wisdom. Chronic physical symptoms often speak the language of the disowned self. That persistent tension in your shoulders might carry anger you never express. By attending to physical symptoms with psychological awareness, you invite shadow integration at the somatic level. Viktor Frankl's emphasis on finding meaning amid suffering applies powerfully to shadow work. What is to give light must endure burning, he wrote. Shadow integration involves this willing exposure to the heat of self-confrontation, trusting that the result will be increased light. Your personal shadow work doesn't occur in isolation. You exist within collective fields, family, cultural, historical, that carry their own shadow material. As you become more conscious of your individual shadow, you naturally develop greater sensitivity to these collective shadows as well. Jung was deeply concerned with the collective unconscious, the layer of the psyche containing shared human experiences. Just as individuals repress uncomfortable aspects, entire societies banish certain realities from conscious awareness. You can see this collective shadow in persistent social problems, racism, environmental destruction, wealth inequality. These aren't just policy issues, but expressions of collective shadow material. By doing your personal shadow work, you contribute to collective healing by withdrawing from unconscious projection and scapegoating. The discovery of the unconscious, wrote Jung, means an enormous spiritual task, which must be accomplished if we wish to preserve our civilization. This statement feels eerily prophetic in our current moment, as collective shadows erupt globally in polarization and crisis. Yet within this challenge lies unprecedented opportunity. Never before have so many people had access to psychological knowledge and tools for inner work. The spread of contemplative practices and depth psychology creates conditions for conscious shadow integration on a scale previously unimaginable. Remember that the shadow isn't your enemy. It's the disowned part of yourself longing for acknowledgement. The very aspects of yourself that you've rejected may contain your greatest gifts. The shadow contains not just your wounds, but your untapped potential. The very sensitivity that made you vulnerable in childhood might, when reclaimed, become your greatest strength. The anger you learned to suppress might fuel righteous action. The wildness you were taught to tame might spark creative breakthroughs. I am not what happened to me, Jung wrote. I am what I choose to become. By integrating your shadow, you expand the field of conscious choice, liberating energy previously bound in repression. You become more fully yourself, not a perfect self, but a whole one. And in this wholeness lies the profound healing that Jung discovered, not as a quick fix or spiritual bypass, but as a journey of authentic integration that continues throughout a lifetime of conscious living. The two wolves continue their dance, but now in balance, now in conscious harmony, now in the fullness of your integrated being.